The station you've selected to stay connected. News Talk 550, KTSA, and FM 1071. Honestly provocative talk at LarsLarson.com.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you on a Tuesday, and if I haven't said it before, Merry Christmas to you and yours. Your calls are welcome, and we'll get back to them shortly at 866-439-5277. Emails to talk at LarsLarson.com. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Dr. Alex Del Carmen, head of the School of Criminology, the Criminal Justice and Strategic Studies at Tarleton State University in Fort Worth. Doctor, it's good to have you on. Thanks for taking the time.
It's good to be on. Thanks for having me.
So yesterday we had two terrorist attacks, one against the Russian ambassador in Turkey, the second in Berlin against a Christmas market as we head up to Christmas Day. And the question is, we know how I think the current administration is going to respond to things like this, a strongly worded letter and maybe a statement that they disapprove, or they disapprove strongly. How should Donald Trump be responding to this when he takes office a month from today?
You know, I think it's really, really important to be able to demonstrate to the rest of the world that the United States is not going to tolerate any kind of harm against its people or its interests or any of its allies. And I think that for us, setting the tone on that first day of his administration is going to be crucially important. We've already seen an impact of what he had with the drone situation with the Chinese, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the world reacts on January 21st.
You think that Donald Trump, there's no doubt that Donald Trump is going to have some countries like China, they're going to deliberately try to provoke him?
There is no question that Donald Trump is going to be tested. And I've always, I've said this since before the elections, that I felt that a Republican administration is going to be tested in the next 3 to 6 months after that individual takes over office. And if you look at history, that's the way it's happened in previous Republican administrations. There's always that measurement that other countries and terrorists particularly have to try to see how far that president is going to go.
Well, and I want to ask you, what's your evaluation after 8 years of watching President Obama respond to terrorist attacks on our own soil, terrorist attack recently at Ohio State University, and his reaction to it? Can you sum that up for us and what you think of the way he has responded?
You know, I think that the response has been incredibly slow, and I think it's been lukewarm. And to be quite honest with you, I've always said this too, is that no response is a response. And so in many ways, by not responding, right away, by not responding swiftly, by not condemning those individuals that have attacked us, I think people have read us as being a very weak country, of being individuals that are willing to allow these terrorists to get away literally with murder. And I think it's going to be crucially important to see that the new administration handles this in a swift and quick manner to let the rest of the world know that we don't play in the United States.
You know, Doctor, one of the things that seems a little strange to me is that I've, in 40 years of covering the news, I've seen plenty of both Democrats and Republicans who talk a good game. They talk about violation of human rights. They talk about threats to our liberties. They talk a good game. Why do you suppose it is that when somebody like Barack Obama became president, that he didn't feel the necessity to respond more forcefully, let's say, against these kinds of threats? Because it would seem to be the easiest call in the world. A lot of decisions a president has to make require some nuance. They require, being careful whether you back a piece of legislation or not, whether you appoint a certain person to your administration or not, things like that take a little bit of balance. But when it comes to an attack on people, whether it's our people overseas or our people here at home or foreign countries' people overseas in their own country, you would think that I guess, I go back to Goldwater, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. I wish President Obama had a little more of that, and I wonder, why would a man who talked so strongly about defending the civil liberties of people in his own country not say, and we need to make sure that when there are threats to our country or threats against a foreign country that could turn into threats against our country, that he didn't respond more forcefully?
Well, and then first and foremost, there's no greater responsibility that a president of the United States has than protecting the people that he governs. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no question that the pursuit of of the safety of Americans, both in the homeland and overseas, lies as the greatest responsibility for any president in the history of our country. So for starters, you've got this main goal and objective and responsibility that all presidents share, which is to protect human life at all costs. And then secondly, the second component of that is that, the response, like I said earlier, has been very slow. It has been a lukewarm response, and I think that at the end of the day, there's been almost like an intellectualism of all the different attacks that have taken place. Well, let's see what happened. Let's go out there and study, what policy derivatives this particular impact, this attack has on U.S. foreign policy, and we'll get back to you 10 months later on. And he'll be the first one to point out at the fact that Osama bin Laden died under his administration. But at the end of the day, it was the good people of the intelligence community and our Navy SEALs that actually executed that order. So I don't take away from him that the fact that he had to execute it, but at the same time, I think is you have to look at the aggregate form of threats. I
don't know, Doc. Let me test this on you because you've studied it more than I have. On that point about bin Laden, the intelligence community did find him. It did take a decade to find him. I don't think there was any lack of will by the previous administration to find him. But to some extent, wasn't the intelligence community a bit handcuffed by the current administration in that search?
Right. So yeah, and actually what the intelligence officers have told us publicly now is that you see that there's been all these rules of engagement that somehow have prevented our drones to do what they're supposed to do and our military to pound at ISIS, all over the world. And so in many ways they have been handcuffed to political correctness for the past 8 years, and that's slowed down the process substantially. So you have no disagreements on my end when it comes to that.
All right. Now, how does Donald Trump, as president, when he takes office on the 20th, how does he respond forcefully to these without, I guess, going over a line? Because you know that most of the mainstream media and many of the left don't like the Trump presidency, and I think they're going to be willing to find fault just as quickly as they possibly can if they think he's gone beyond a certain point.
There's no question that the Trump presidency is going to face more scrutiny in the next 4 years than perhaps any president in the history of the United States. And at the same time, he's going to have responsibilities and challenges that probably no other president up to now has had. And one of them is particularly, as I said earlier, setting the tone. I think that's going to be very, very important. That president, Trump, would pick up the phone on a day like today and call Merkel and let her know that the United States stands by Germany, that the United States is going to assist in the investigation of what happened in Germany yesterday, and that the United States is going to gather intelligence and learn from this so that this doesn't happen on U.S. soil and it doesn't happen to other countries overseas. And he's going to let people know that the United States is that involved at that level. I guarantee you, and I'm not playing the game of second-guessing the German authorities, but I promise you that if law enforcement in the United States would have been involved in that investigation early on, that suspect by now would have been caught or killed. And yet it is alarming to the rest of us that the German authorities a few hours ago admitted to the fact that individual is not in custody at this time.
Yeah, and they released the other gentleman, and I hate to say this, Dr. Del Carmen, but I have a feeling that had that happened in our country, you'd have every one of the left-wing media saying, oh, this poor man who was inappropriately taken into custody, who had nothing to, they'd be singing this sad song. Well, in some cases, I think the public is going to look at these and say, if you go out and you have to arrest people based on descriptions and you grab the wrong guy accidentally and no harm is done to them, then what's the harm? That we should have a broader net rather than a narrower net. Although I think an awful lot of reporters and anchors and all feel as though, we should be as careful as we can. When it comes to the terrorists, we have to get it right 100% of the time. They only have to do it once. Dr. Del Carmen, thank you so much for the time, and Merry Christmas to you and yours.
And to you as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you much. You've got the Lars Larson Show.
The Lars Larson Show.